All right, welcome back to Veritas Live, everyone. I'm Demetrius Malbro, your host, and today we will explore the DevOps principle of shift left, along with the best practices for securing and backing up your Kubernetes environments. And so, security, you must shift left, and shifting left, it must also be integrated into your DevOps workflows instead of being bolted on when the application is about to be deployed into production. And so, since we are talking about security, we might as well go ahead and talk about data protection as well and data governance. And yesterday, we actually launched our Veritas 360 Defense architecture. And Veritas 360 Defense brings together core capabilities from our portfolio with pre-integrated solutions from our ecosystem of cybersecurity partners to help you ensure that your data is safe, rapidly recoverable, and also in compliance as well. And so we also have our community manager, Ben Spickert. He's here, and he will also drop a link to that recording in the chat window. And speaking of the chat window, we also would like for you to ask your questions in the chat window as well. So please don't be shy. And I also really love to see where everyone is watching from all around the world. Now, this brings me to the introduction of our special guest. And you may know him as a popular blogger or a best-selling author on topics like the Kubernetes book, Docker Deep Dive, Quick Start Kubernetes, and the KCNA, or Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate book. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Nigel Poulton on.
Hello, Demetrius, mate. Thank you for having me. I'm pretty excited. You know what? I wanted to pick up on something really quick that you said at the beginning there when you were doing the introduction.
Yeah.
You said that quite often we bolt on security at live. And I feel like you were doing us like a bit of a favor there. So often we bolt it on way after that. It's only when something goes up in flames, so to speak, that we then realize, oh, we need to bolt something on. So I just picked up on that there. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure we're that good.
Yeah. Well, I am glad that you were listening and not zoning out before I started talking about all your super major and fantastic accolades here. And I want to break the ice with you though. And I do know that you are a huge Star Trek fan. And I really would like to know which Star Trek special edition that you actually love. And I know that your book, you have certain versions of your book that you'll be signing and giving away at our booth at KubeCon in Chicago soon. So what is your favorite or best version of Star Trek? Is it the original one, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine? Which one is it?
Yeah. Oh, mate. So I think I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was actually quite a big part of my life. And as I got older, I got my first job working at a fast food restaurant. And I remember that was when Star Trek Voyager first came out. And I would get paid on a Friday, and every other Friday there would be a new VHS released of Star Trek Voyager. And I'd go straight to the store next door to the fast food restaurant I worked at, and I would buy Star Trek Voyager. So I grew up, I think, on the Next Generation and Voyager, and they were always the best ones for me. Until, that is, I discovered Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And so that's like the latest spin-off. I know it's on Paramount Plus in the UK, right? But yeah, I guess I like all Star Treks, right? So I watch them all, Lower Decks, all of them. But honestly, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, it has blown away, for me, the Next Generation and Voyager as my favorites. They are like number 2 and number 3 now. So number 1 for me now is Star Trek Strange New Worlds. They have done such a good job with that. I love it.
You know what? I haven't quite caught that one yet, but one thing I want to go back to, you mentioned VHS, and I'm sure we have some younger audience members on,
Oh,
and they may not even know what VHS is. But I know we're not going to get into that. But do you still happen to have the VHS rewinder, that little like thing that rewinded the video before you popped it
no, no,
in?
I don't. Do you know what? I wish as well that I'd kept all of those original VHS cassettes because I bought them as originals in original packaging and stuff like that. If I still had them now, I'd have them up behind me, like on
Ah,
display. But I was foolish, I think, and I got rid of them years ago when DVDs were the latest craze.
yeah, and then Blu-ray came around and
Yeah.
kind of blew everything out the water, and now everything is in the cloud, right? Even
Yeah, and it's better than it's ever been, to be fair, isn't it? Because we can watch it whenever we want. I mean, we don't want to go into the VHS stuff, but do you remember you would sometimes get tracking issues at the bottom of the screen? Sometimes if the tape was getting a little mangled. So, the fact that we can
remember.
stream it now and it's always in 4K or HD or whatever is, it's great.
All right. So since we are talking about the subject and the principle of shift left, and we're talking DevOps and DevSecOps, and but let's start at the beginning because as I mentioned, we may have some younger audience members on. So let's talk a little bit about the state of security as it pertains to Kubernetes. Let's start off really broad, and then we'll kind of work our way into shift left.
What's like my current view of the state of where it is right now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, oh, I mean, my gut wants to say that it's messy, but I feel like that might be being a little bit harsh to some of the technologies and the people that are involved. Okay, so I'd probably say that it feels early. Okay, so how about this? Right, we've been talking about Star Trek and kind of sci-fi. If Demetrius, if you, for any listeners or
Mhm.
watchers, from 5 years' time was to come back to now and to look at the state of security in Kubernetes, then that Demetrius will be like, oh. Whereas I think we're going, so I'm saying it's early, but I do feel like we're going in the right direction. So if this Demetrius from the future was to then explain to you and I right now what the state of Kubernetes security is like in 5 years' time, then we would be like, whoa, can we get there? So I feel
Mhm.
like it's early, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. And for me, it feels like there's three things. So there's the technology, there's the process, and there's the people. And I
Okay.
reckon if I look at them, the technology, to me at least, okay, feels like it's the more advanced of the three. Like, I think we've got some decent technologies and things out there, but as people and as users and as implementers, I don't know, the vast majority of us don't quite know what to do with those technologies yet. So the technologies are not so bad. We're going in the right direction. People are a little bit further behind. But I think I mentioned three things, didn't I? Technology, process, and people. We
Okay.
need to build the processes because it's processes that help people at the end of the day, isn't it? So I don't know. We're inching for me in the right direction.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we are in a good place, and if we're inching, then that means we're moving a little bit in the right direction because we all know that the hot topic right now is making sure that everyone is educated when it comes to security because there's still such a gap overall in cybersecurity, a skills gap as
Yeah.
well. So this also brings me to our DevOps audience that's out there. So thank you for being out there, DevOps audience and DevSecOps as well. Don't be shy. Go ahead and post in the chat window. But let's get to shifting left. All right. So what is that term? Because I'm sure people have seen it before. Some people might ignore it, and some people may not know exactly what it is. But what is shift left, and what are we doing to adopt that philosophy in Kubernetes and the development community?
So I think the first thing, if I can say this, if you don't mind, I know you said at the beginning of the session that, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Well, I would say that the technology world is just littered with acronyms and jargon and buzzwords and things like that. Don't ever be afraid to not understand what somebody is talking about when they use terms like shift left. I know it's really hard to hold your hand up and say, can you just explain that to me? But you're not alone. Like, we've got way too much jargon. So I think to simplify it at probably the very highest level, right? And we can maybe go a little deeper if you want to, but is
Yeah.
just to move the whole concept of security to the beginning of everything. So you said at the beginning, didn't you, that sometimes we bolt security on when we go live. And I kind of joked, half joked actually, because I'm kind of serious about it, that sometimes we don't bolt it on until things break. From a security perspective. Well, shift left is the opposite of that. It's like, let's say before we even write the first line of code, we should have had the conversation about how we secure whatever it is we're about to build and deliver. So move it as early in the, I was going to say development, but as early into the design phase as possible. So like as soon as we get a new project, start thinking, right, what can we do to make this a secure project? I mean, I can go into more if you want, like we can talk about inner and outer loops and things like that. But I feel like at that very highest level, it's just get it into the conversation from day one, from day zero.
Yeah. And to me, it seems like there's not only a shift in the behavior, but there's also a shift in the mindset of keeping things secure and not only just thinking about moving fast, because we're in the information age now and everyone wants to move super fast, but we all need to slow down and think about, okay, how is what I am doing right now going to affect the security, number one, of myself, right? If it's on a personal level, but then of the application or that system that I am working on. So I think you're spot on right there.
Can I just say, Demetrius, on that aspect of yourself, okay, even if it's a work project, okay, we really need to be looking after ourselves, our teammates, and our co-workers and things when it comes to security, because we are in a world now where if we don't do security, or if we forget, or if we don't do it right, then people can lose jobs, and none of us ever want that to happen. So we need to make sure that we're doing this for our own careers, but also for our colleagues and people and our customers as well. It's such a broad thing that we've got to be thinking about it. But you said as well that we need to slow down a little bit and think. And that, for me, okay, is a little bit of a touchy subject. So the early phases of developing anything, okay, are always like, let's just iterate. We'll throw stuff out there, ideas, concepts, and we'll get something that's working. But it's all about speed. And if we throw in security that slows that down too much, people are not going to take it. They're going to say, we're going to park it and leave it for later into that outer loop when we're deploying to live or whatever. So we have a responsibility as tool makers, but also as people that create processes and people that implement technologies. We have got to make it as, if I can say, frictionless as possible early on. So yes, we have to slow down and have a bit of a think about it, but we need to be careful that we don't slow down too much. Otherwise, people will just say, yeah, we're not doing that. We'll leave it to somebody else later down the line.
Yeah, we all want to keep our jobs as well, because we've seen the trends of layoffs and all that, but we're not here to talk about that either. But I do want to mention and also ask you, well, if we are thinking frictionless and we're also talking about maybe some of the best practices or some of the resources and the tools that DevOps should be adopting, like what are some of those best practices and tools that DevSecOps and DevOps should be adopting from not only just their peers, but I'm talking about the security counterpart?
Yeah. So I think the most obvious one is to do what we've been talking about so far, and is just shift it left. So move everything right to the beginning. So have those conversations early on. But also, this is something that I feel quite strongly about at the moment. So if you remember back before we had containers, we would quite often have this issue where we would develop an application and we test it and all of that. And as soon as we put it into production, it broke. And the joke was it worked on my laptop. And the problem that we had there was that once we shipped through dev and all those pipelines and we went to production looked different to dev and test. So maybe it had different libraries and different versions of dependencies and things like that. Well, along came containers and it fixed that for us. But there's so much more to that now. So I feel passionately that, let's say we're developing and deploying onto Kubernetes, that our Kubernetes environments have got to look, smell, and feel as much like production as possible. So what we're doing there is we're taking, if I can say this right, we're taking our production environments and we are shifting those left into development and test as far as possible. Because the last thing that we want to do is do all of our development and testing on our laptops and in our test environments, and they may have no role-based access control set up. They might have no network policies. They might not do pod security or anything like that. And we think, oh, well, we're deploying containers, so it's got all of our dependencies built in. Well, we can safely ship to production. You go and ship that to a production Kubernetes cluster, and maybe the admission controllers or policies or whatever are just not even going to allow you to deploy it. So I feel like we need to be making our dev and test environments a lot more production-like. So taking our production requirements and shifting those left. It made me think, actually, just there, that I think this is true, right? Years ago, I was told that top sports teams, so I'm a football fan, or soccer in the UK, right? And some of the top teams, apparently, if they've got a big, let's call it a European game or something, they'll have a special field cut, a pitch, the grass cut to the same length of the opposition where they're going to go and play. So let's say you're based out of Manchester and it's wet, cold and windy and you're going to go and play in Madrid or Barcelona. Well, they would find out how long they cut the grass in Barcelona, and they'll cut the grass that long, and they'll make the pitch exactly the same size it is over there. You don't want it 10 yards short or anything like that. So they would make their training environment as much like the real world game environment as possible. And we need to do that with our production, with our development and test environments, I think.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely love that sports analogy, because I am a big fan of Kobe and Michael Jordan, and those were two of the most phenomenal players. I mean, their work ethic was amazing, and they did similar things. Practice to them was like the real thing, and that's why they were able to hit those buzzer-beating shots. So I also want to say, and I am looking in the chat window, well, there's a little bit of conversation going on, and there's people around the world. So I'm looking at people from Canada, people from Brazil, India. I even see North Carolina sprinkled in there. So Munich.
Good barbecue there.
But oh, well, we don't even want to talk about barbecue because I'm from Memphis. So
okay,
much better barbecue. But I want to see some questions in the chat window so we can have Nigel to maybe answer a few of those questions. But if not, I am going to keep rolling here, and we'll just see who's going to speak up, because we do have an ebook that we might be able to give out to someone out there who is super engaged and lucky to get that ebook just to participate here in the chat. But Nigel, I also want to know from you as well, and looks like something just popped in there. Let's see what that is. Agree, we have to be close to production, but it depends upon how often releases we do. Ooh, Nigel,
yeah.
What do you think about that?
So I do agree with that, and I understand, right? There's a financial investment that goes into left shifting our production environments or requirements. There's a time investment and all of that, and it's not easily done. But I think as more and more organizations deploy like microservices design patterns and deploying containers and things like that, it does enable us, and a lot of organizations are doing this already, like multiple deployments a week and sometimes a day. And if you want to get to that point, and there are tons of benefits for going down that route, then it just becomes even more and more important. Like back in the day, like when we would push a big software update once a year, over like a long 4-day weekend, and we'd take everything down. We'd have to warn our partners in advance, and the whole team would be in the office over the weekend, and it'd be pizzas morning, afternoon, and evening. And, you had the CEO's cell number on speed dial just in case things went wrong. Okay, if that was the world and we're doing one deployment or one update a year, for sure, I get it that it's like, what's the value in the investment there? However, we're moving really rapidly away from that to where we are able to be, deploying, like I say, multiple rollouts and updates per day. And when you get to that kind of a place, shall we say, then it's of absolute paramount importance that your development and test environments match your production environments.
Okay, that is a common theme here. And if you're not picking up on test matching production, then I'm not quite sure if you're asleep or not. But that is definitely a theme here today. And also, Nigel, I want to figure out how we can continue to move faster. And one way I know that we can move fast is through automation. So are there ways to automate security, especially for Kubernetes in the, let's say, the development lifecycle?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of organizations have at least some form of a build pipeline, like CI, CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. There are ways to implement things like vulnerability scanning is a really easy one, but a really good one as well. Implement that into your build pipelines and things like that as early as possible, okay? So that you can flag before you go to production any major vulnerabilities that you really don't want in your production environments. And this kind of a move from just CI/CD to, if we can call it, CT as well, so continuous testing. So make sure that we're continuously testing against security vulnerabilities and things like that. I almost feel like nowadays there's no excuse not to be doing at least vulnerability scanning. So for anybody that's maybe not quite sure, so vulnerability scanning generally will take a container image and it will do like a binary level scan of that image. And it'll say, right, this image has got all of these different software packages in, and it'll enumerate all the versions and things like that. And then it will compare those packages and versions against a database of known vulnerabilities. And then it'll give you a really detailed report, quite often with like fixes in as well, that will say, okay, you're using a particular version of whatever, glibc, yeah? And it's got this known vulnerability, and that's a critical vulnerability, and you really shouldn't be deploying that to production. And quite often it will say, if you move to this version, then you'll be safe. I mean, yeah. I'm not saying it's a no-brainer, but if we are serious about looking after our jobs and looking after our client security and our company's security and things like that, it's such an easy one to just bolt in. And most pipelines and most container registries and things like that will allow you to just bake this right into your existing pipelines.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and put a nice bow on top of this episode here. And any closing remarks, anything that you would like to leave with the audience, and I'll also make sure that everyone has the information they need, because I am super stoked about being at KubeCon. But I'll let you go ahead and provide some closing remarks before I get into all of the exciting things that I have to share.
Okay, so let me just say on the things that we've been talking about, right? So number one, I'm going to say, and I hope I don't sound silly by saying this, but don't be afraid to embrace AI in your Kubernetes environments and in your development and production environments and things like that. I almost can see a day where, some AI tools will be hooked up to and analyzing hundreds, maybe thousands of complex Kubernetes environments out there and just learning at a rate that we can't. And then be able to, help us fix things, help us prevent things so that we don't have to fix them. And I mean, gosh, even if AI can help me figure out my YAML files, then I'm game for it. But aside from that, I think out at KubeCon, so I'm going to be at KubeCon in Chicago. I'll be at the Veritas booth. We're doing a book signing there, some of the special editions of the books, which are really cool. If you're a technology geek or a sci-fi geek, head along for a free copy. And just, I always say this, right, to people when it comes to conferences like KubeCon. If you see me, or if you see anybody there, like if you see Demetrius there, like just come and say hi. It's really hard to do that. I get it sometimes, like, because I'll get people afterwards to say, hey, I saw you, but I wasn't confident enough to come over, or I didn't feel like I should come and just like, whatever, come and say hi. Because we've all been there before. And you might think, oh, I wanted to ask you a question or something like that. Just come and do it. We're mainly, I think, friendly people.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're a pretty friendly guy, Nigel, which is why I have you here. But just to let everyone know, we are at KubeCon in Chicago, so please check us out at booth number C1, and that's November the 7th through the 9th. We also have a keynote, which will be on the topic of containers, might be ephemeral, but can your business afford to be? And that's going to be delivered by our very own Chris Weiborg, who is the VP of Product and Solutions. And we also we're going to have some live panel discussions. You can get a product demo, you can meet the experts. And we also have our book signing event with Nigel Poulton himself. So please come by. We're gonna have quite a few copies, so make sure you come by, you get that signed copy, and you can grab a selfie with Nigel as well. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, and watching this episode of Veritas Live. And until next time, stay secure and back up often.